Today, we are joined on the show by Emilia Uupindi-Muteka. She is a member of the Swapo Party Youth League Central Committee. Of course, she'll be speaking mostly in her private capacity as someone who's been in the space of student politics for some time, and also Maximalliant Katjimune, who is the national spokesperson of the PDM Youth League. Welcome to the evening review, Emilia and Max.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Twivo.
Yeah, indeed. Let's start with Emilia. You know, the results for the high grade and ordinary level for grade 12 and 11, as a matter of fact, have been released this morning. What is your immediate impression of what you've seen so far?
I think first, we have seen an improvement. There's been a slight improvement, even though 2.5%, which in my view, any improvement is a good thing. So I think despite the COVID-19 hardships that the academic fraternity has faced throughout 2020, I'm very personally very happy, and I think as a nation we are happy to see the slight improvement in terms of the performance and also the number of students who are eligible to go to institutions. So it is a glimpse of good news, I think.
Indeed. Max, your reaction to the results?
Well, Twivo, we are happy as the PDM Youth League, and we welcome the release of these results after a very disruptive academic year in 2020. I think it is safe to say that it is quite an achievement that the ministry could release these results after that disruptive year in 2020. However, even though supposedly the grade 12 admission rate into university, particularly for degree programs, improved, we are still of the view that it's a terribly low number. I remember that when I matriculated in 2016, we had only 19% qualifying for degree admission at university, and a few years down in 2021, that number has gone up to about 24.1%. But really, by any stretch of the imagination, it's a terribly low number. It means a significant majority of students, of learners, are not transitioning from grade 12 into university, and particularly into that space of degree level. Hence, we are of the view that to tackle this problem, really, the government and the Ministry of Education have to work much better to develop the vocational training space, because we see that a significant majority of students are perhaps not necessarily interested in pursuing the typical academic courses offered at university. So we have it incumbent upon ourselves to make sure that the vocational training curriculum is incorporated formally into the formal university system, because I think the way we have adopted vocational training in Namibia is that when you go to vocational school, is that you are out of the formal education system. You are not in university. You are sort of in a dark space, the black sheep space of education, if I can put it that way, for lack of a better word. So, for example, at UNAM, there must be a faculty of vocational training. I know that at NAS they did such at the school, but it must be expanded much more, even at IUM and so forth, so that you can really formalize it and bring it back into the university system. Another thing of concern to us at Twivo is the issue of the grade 11 who wrote the Namibia Senior Secondary Certificate on ordinary level. We know that the University of Namibia, through its spokesperson Jonah Ofiku, came out last week and said really that the University of Namibia is not going to be accepting grade 11 students. So we are also questioning really the engagement and the consultative process that went into the University of Namibia, or the Ministry of Education, Arts and Culture implementing this sort of curriculum without consulting the stakeholders, which is the university. And we are then of the view that if these students are not going to be accepted into university, then there must be no requirements for them going into grade 12 advanced subsidiary. We know that we are glad that IUM gave its position last night, and they say that they are going to accept the grade 11s in line with government position. But the two major universities, which is UNAM and NAST, have sort of rejected these grade 11s, and we are concerned about that. But also, lastly, this shocking statistic that more than 30,000 students did not return to school. We are very concerned about this, and out of that 30,000, more than 3,000 dropped out due to pregnancy. So we are imploring on the Ministry of Education to explore all mechanisms to ensure that these students are incorporated back into the basic education system.
Yeah, thank you, Max. Emilia, I know that you're not speaking for the Swapo Party Youth League particularly, but you are listening to Max, of course, expressing the views of the PDM Youth League there, especially on the grade 11 admission to university. In your position, just as a member of the ruling party Youth League, and also a student, an activist in that space, what is your position on the universities denying grade 11 graduates admission?
I think, like you rightfully said, like I'm not speaking on behalf of the Youth League. I'm sure the Youth League will come out with its own position. But I think just to give my 2 cents on it is that definitely there was a lack of coordination and collaboration in this implementation, because I don't see why at this point we should be at this point where the Ministry of Education does one thing and the Ministry of Higher Education does another thing. I think this is really something that is being maybe ironed out in the background to see as to how exactly we can resolve this issue. It is quite, I think, an embarrassing problem to have because it shows a lack of coordination between 2 line ministries. But I believe this is something that is being resolved. But yeah, unfortunately, the students are the ones now who are suffering at the expense of this decision, where it looks like not everyone was widely consulted or not everyone was on board with the decision to change the curriculum.
Indeed. And just before I return to Max, I'll still ask you, Emilia, the issue of student funding, the Namibia Student Financial Assistance Fund, NASFAF as we call it. I understand they only fund degree programs, and what we've seen yesterday is that only about 21% has qualified for degrees, and other people who may have been considered as having passed are only qualifying for degree and other lower programs. Is it time that NASFAF reflects on these issues and say, look, maybe we must expand the horizons a bit and assist those in lower university degree qualification enrollments?
I think definitely this is something that needs to be reviewed, because I think currently in its form as it is, NSFF funds based on its funding policy. And that policy then has certain criteria put in places who's eligible for funding and what programs and qualifications they fund. However, this is definitely, like I said, something that needs to be looked at and to be reviewed so that this can be revised. But on that line, this also fund some diploma applications, not necessarily only degrees, and there are also vocational training students or who are funded by NSFF. But as it stands now, it is a law implication because of the policy that is in place. But I definitely agree with you. That policy needs to be reviewed so that we can also definitely expand the horizon or the scope with which students are funded via the National Students Funding Association.
And Max, without, I mean, in not so many words, because your statement is of course out there, give us the sense of what you were saying on that particular aspect of student funding.
Yeah, Trevor, I just have to clarify one thing there. NASFAF does fund diplomas. Depending, as long as the student has 20 in 5 subjects and is going to register for a diploma on NQA level 6. So that is the current funding policy of NASFAF, is that, oh yes, they do fund diplomas as long as this diploma is on NQF level 6 and as long as the student has 22 points and 22 points in 5 subjects. But nonetheless, this still excludes the significant majority of students, especially for those who are not aware of these things and may register for other diplomas that are perhaps registered on NQF level 4 and NQF level 5. And considering the fact that also they do not fund certificates and these sort of things. And there was quite a confusion last year with students who registered for diplomas on NQF level 5, but they ended up not being funded by NASFAF. And another huge challenge is that this policy is actually contradictory at Twivo, because NASFAF on the one hand says that yes, we will fund your diploma as long as you have 25 points in 5 subjects and your diploma is on NQF level 6. So here you are as a student, you are studying for 3 years for that diploma, you graduate, but then after 3 years, you want to now register for a degree and you apply for NASFAF for that degree. And then NASFAF is telling us, yes, you got the diploma, yes, you graduated, but you actually need 25 points to register for the degree. So if you register with the 22 points for the diploma, you must also make sure at the same time that you go to NAMCOL to go and raise your points to up to 25 points in 5 subjects in order to qualify for NASFAF for your degree. So it's actually a very contradictory process that NASFAF undertook in terms of them funding diplomas. But as student leaders, our position has always been very clear. If you qualify for university, whether it's a certificate, whether it's a higher diploma, whether it's a degree, you must be able to qualify for NASFAF. But that is the current status quo.
Okay. So Emilia, you serve you are an active member of the Swapo Party Youth League. What kind of factors have you as a league or as individuals serving in the league identified that affect the performance of students? Because we are talking about marginal increases in the pass rates. 2.5% was mentioned earlier on. Of course, you want maybe double digits of the pass rates. What are some of the factors that you've identified, and as young politicians in the ruling party, what kind of messages do you give to fellow party leaders who are serving in government?
I think really, yes, in terms of, I won't say there's no accessibility, because majority of Namibians do have access to schools. But I'm just saying that also one I find very key is also a parental involvement in education. I believe there's a lot of stakeholders that are coming to the party in terms of the education of an Namibian child, but most parental involvement in education is really lacking. Because I'm just saying that, yes, I understand all parents are academically able to assist you with your education or your schoolwork, but just commitment of a parent towards the performance or towards your education is very important. If you also just look at it in terms of schools that have performed, I think one of the key contributing factors is definitely a parental involvement. And then the other thing is also in terms of discipline as well. That is a very key thing. Like I said, that yes, at the end of the day, we also just need to want our learners to also know that I'm doing this for me. I need to have the necessary discipline to be able to following, able to commit to my work. Yes, the issue of learner to teacher ratio, that also plays a role, especially in most public schools. That can also be definitely a contributing factor to the performance, because if you're a slow learner, you don't get that undivided attention from a teacher compared to, for example, to a more private school. That for me, I think those are 3 key contributing factors to the performance of learners' education and their results at the end of the day.
Okay, and just still, Emilia, the fact that we still have children learning under trees, we have introduced this free education thing, which for me as a parent is not working at all. Are we really going to say that parental involvement will solve the challenges faced by children who find themselves under those circumstances, for example?
Therefore, I just want to say that, look, I think even before the whole free education came into play, is that education was basically, let me say, free. Because what I was saying, what is free education? One, the teachers have always been paid by the state. 2, the building of schools has always been on the cost of the state. A major cost has always been the state. What has been taken away with free education is really the school development fund that the parents used to contribute towards education. And this was ranging from different amounts from school to school. Some schools were paying as little as 250, some schools were paying as little as 300, 500. I think the whole notion of taking away school development fund is a noble notion, especially given that there are some parents who couldn't afford it and they were being prejudiced as a matter of that. But also, it's also unfair to the parents who could afford it. Because if you speak to most school principals, this school development fund could be used, for example, in terms of repairs and maintenance. If a desk got broken, if for example, a textbook got lost, to replace that textbook, upkeep of sports facility, the school bus. However, that is not the major cost of education. The major cost of education has always been carried by the government. The government is still doing so. Yes, I also want to say that this has impacted the conducive environment of learning at schools, yes. But do we really need to say that it has affected the quality? That is, I think, a debate on its own. But then also, just maybe to conclude, is just to say that, one, we do agree that the Ministry of Education, in terms of the release of funds to the schools, yes, it's very late sometimes. It comes late when schools have already started. The schools need tertiary they need stationery. And in that, they then force parents to want to contribute. I think we can really improve in terms of that administration to release the money earlier to the schools, so that when the academic year starts, the schools have the necessary stationaries and the necessary money for maintenance and everything that they need. And then the other only thing I also want to add is that there are private schools that are being established in our villages, in our communities. Because the Ministry of Education does have a policy on or what structures needs to be in place when you put up a school. But then, yes, we need coordination between government agencies, the Ministry of Education, the Statistics Agency, so that we can see that what do we see in an area, the number of students that are going to come up in that area, so that we can be able to build the schools already in advance. Because to see now the school is very far, that is already established under the necessary requirements of the protocol of how a school should be built. But now, because that school is very far, I've moved now to a new village. I'm setting up a new private school, right? Because the government school is very far for the students to go. We're setting up a new private school under a tree. Yes, the government does support some of those in terms for the teachers and everything. But I'm not saying that, I'm saying that, yes, it's not a good thing that we're saying that students, even after 30 years, are still learning under trees. But is it necessarily that governments are the ones that are building up these school structures? I don't think so. That is really something that can also be looked at.
Yeah, okay. Just for the record, Emilia, I'm paying more now during the free education regime for my daughter than I did when we were still paying the school development fund. But that's besides the point. Max, what are your views as a league of the official opposition party on the subject of free education? Is it really something that is practical? Is it working, or is it a cheap ploy to buy political points by using the term free education, when in fact on the ground the reality seems to be the other way around?
Well, I think we have to contextualize this issue and dissect it very carefully and properly. Number one, as a country that is coming from historical inequalities, where the majority is poor, we cannot deny that free education has some sort of impact on the poorest of the poorest in terms of being able to send their children to school. In fact, before free education, there was quite heartbreaking stories of a parent not even affording $100 to put their kids through the first trimester of school. So to a fair extent, you cannot deny that free education is needed in some form, and it has some sort of impact, especially on the poorest of the poor of society. But I think the way free education was implemented in Namibia it was implemented with political influence, because we believe that free education was supposed to be implemented structurally and not holistically, like in the form that it has been implemented now. For example, in South Africa, you would know that there is, even in government schools, there is what is this? There is level A, level B, and class 6 schools. And put it an example for you, I would say that I attended Yanmore Secondary School. Yanmore Secondary School is a school of mostly the middle class, from Commersdal and Windhoek West and so forth. That school, before free education, it made plus minus 4 million in revenue and school development funds a year, from parents who are willing participants of paying school development funds, because they believe in the capability of the school and so forth, and they are willing parents. But you cannot say that same situation for a school like Emmanuel Chifidi. We know that that school is in Katutura. It significantly, it has students that are coming from very disadvantaged backgrounds, whose parents cannot really afford the school development funds. For, in our opinion, the school development fund was supposed to be implemented. The free education was supposed to be implemented in the following manner. You do not include free education in schools like Yanmore, Windhoek High, perhaps St. Torres and those schools, because we know that historically and presently those schools are schools of the middle class, where parents are willing participants. They want to pay the school development fees, they can afford it and so forth. But free education is supposed to be implemented in those schools where it is proven structurally and historically that they cannot afford free education, such as your Emmanuel Chifidis, such as your Eshipenas, such as your Acustunium, for example. What is the use of making free at a primary school like Queen's Park Primary School? Oh my God. We know that it's a school of upper middle class. They can afford the tuition fees and so forth. So in our regard, that is the manner in which free education is supposed to be implemented. And in fact, schools such as Yanmore and Windhoek High School and so forth have lost revenue. They are struggling financially since free education was implemented, because even your parents can afford now. They say, no, why must I pay this free education? And it's a shame what has happened to this schools since the free education was introduced. And in fact, Toivo, if you had implemented free education in that manner, you could then take the fees you are paying for these schools such as Yanmore and Windhoek High School, and you give to the schools that really need it, your Shifidis, your Agustinium, your Eshipenas, your Moses Gaurebs, and so forth.
Yeah. You want to say something, Emilia, on that?
Yes, yes. I'm just going to say that I beg to differ a little bit with my counterpart here, because the thing is that, look, we don't want to also advocate for injustice. Just because, Emilia, I am a low-income earner, that means to send my child to a higher, low middle-income school just because I cannot afford school development fund. I said we need to be very careful not to advocate inequality, because everyone should be free to go to any school that they want to in this country, not just based on affordability. But also, the other thing we're talking about quality. I'm just saying that in terms of the quality of the schools, or the condition in which they are in now, is it really because of school development fund? I don't think so. Because there are also the challenges that are out there, especially also talking about examples of Yanmore. I am a graduate of yourself. I'm just saying that really the deterioration of some of the public schools, is it necessarily because of school development fund? I beg to, like I say, that we need to really carefully define what do you mean by free education. Taking away school development fund, does that make it free? Because I'm saying that the government used to cater for most of the education costs.
Yeah, I think my understanding really, and I don't want to labor the point now, but free education, when President Pohamba introduced this concept some years ago in the twilight of his presidency, we were made to believe that the government will step in to fill the void that will be left behind by not paying these school development funds anymore. That is the impression that was created. What has happened, actually, what is happening right now, if you go to school that started 2 weeks ago, the situation on the ground is totally different, because parents are asked to buy papers for the school, they're asked to do this, to do that, a role that was supposed to be carried out by the state as per the promise, the original promise of the government. So I am an advocate for free education, but in a shape that was pronounced by President Bahamba, and of course President Gengop went to carry it through. But now, right now, for me, if you ask me as a parent, it looks like free education is simply a rhetoric in black and white, but on the ground, it's actually very, very shocking what's happening. But let's not labor the point. I want to pick your brain on one last subject before I let you go, Emilia and Max, and that is on the subject of the reopening of schools and the universities. We have seen I mean, COVID-19 is still in our midst. We don't know when the vaccines will come and whatnot. And universities, I mean, at some schools, children are coming to school in tents. You are in grade 3B, and that grade 3B is split into two. Group 1 comes this week to create space for distancing, and Group B comes next week. Now, at university, what we are hearing is that people are just learning online. Can the universities replicate what is happening at school so that students actually come for physical classes? Or do you think online learning has been working and we should continue with it? Let's start with Max.
Yes, Trevor, we know that the fundamental difference between the basic education system in Namibia and the higher education system in Namibia is that the basic education system in Namibia has absolutely no systems in place to host online learning, while at least the higher education system has some sort of mechanisms to host online learning, such as Moodle and so forth, and UNAM, etc. So we know that universities have the capacity to host online learning. In fact, for the significant majority of the year since last year, students at UNAM and NAST and IUM were having classes through online learning, and they wrote exams, they were able to be graded, and so forth. So we do not think there is a fundamental problem with universities having online classes, even considering the fact that we are advancing for the fourth industrial revolution and so forth. But we are very clear as the PDM Youth League that this online learning should not be at the disadvantage of any single student. And those ones who are disadvantaged off campus must be able to come back to campus and be accommodated so that they are not disadvantaged by online learning.
So, Emilia, a student, I want to paint a small picture for you. A student, a UNAM student living in Havana on the outskirts of Windhoek. Network is poor, there's no electricity, and they are required to follow the learning process and do their homeworks and follow the lectures. Do we go back to physical classes, or do we continue with online learning, especially when we have scenarios like the one that I just narrated?
I think given our unique, specific, I think, environment to some of this, for example, the one that you have given, it makes it very difficult, yes, to say that everyone should continue online. Because there are some students, of course, who find themselves in circumstances was not possible. But I think in those circumstances, for those students, the universities then should provide environment on campus where students can, under the COVID-19, adhering to COVID-19 regulations, still be able to follow online through the university students, for example, computer centers or something. But where there are a number of students who, for example, who can afford, let's say, a laptop and who have access to Wi-Fi, I think it's also very imperative that university students here also adapt to the standards that are happening globally. Most universities, especially elsewhere in other countries, we have seen people are moving digital. We are moving online. But where it's really not possible, where a student can't, there's no access to internet, there's no electricity, then the student should not be disadvantaged. And the universities should definitely put in place student centers where students can come on campus and follow their lectures. But also in saying that, I want to push that we also just need to kind of move to more digital, move with the world. Everyone is moving digital, but wait, it cannot happen. We do alternative, of course.
Emilia and Max, thank you very much for joining us today on this edition. As a matter of fact, it's our first time that starting today on Friday, on Fridays, our show, which is normally one-on-one interviews from Monday to Thursday, from Friday going forward, we are going to have this kind of panel discussions, and you are the first to actually do the debut sort of panel discussions on the show, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you very much,
Thanks for
Tego,
having
for
us.
the presentation.
Thank you very much. So that is Emilia Mutenda speaking, of course, in her private capacity. She's a member of the Swapo Party Youth League Central Committee, and also Maximalliant Katjimune, who's the national spokesperson of the PDM Youth League. Thank you for watching, and good night.